It is now my great honor to introduce our featured speaker, Mr. Joel Motley, whose long service in the cause of human rights, justice, and equity was first inspired by the shining example of his mother, civil rights leader Judge Constance Baker Motley, who was the first Black woman to become a federal judge, thereby blazing the trail for Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first Black woman to be confirmed to the United States Supreme Court. Mr. Motley has served as chairman of the board of the Human Rights Watch, as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, as a member of the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting, and as secretary of the board for the Greenwald Foundation. After graduating from Harvard College and Harvard Law School, his career included practicing corporate law at Simpson Thacher and Bartlett in New York City, serving as an aide to New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, and co-founding Carmona Motley Incorporated, an investment banking firm. His many contributions to his mother's legacy include co-producing a short film entitled The Trials of Constance Baker Motley, honoring her leadership in school desegregation. We are very fortunate to have Mr. Motley with us today, and I'm delighted to welcome him to our commencement. Mr. Motley.
Thank you very much, Dean Nelson, for that lovely introduction and for the opportunity to share this incredible day with the students and their families. My remarks, of course, will be directed straight at the students. I will try to speak to you as honestly as I can, remembering particularly 44 years ago when I sat where you're sitting now. And I think the most overwhelming memory was the sense of survival. Think of how many times it wasn't clear that you might survive. And then this day arrives and somehow it all happens. Another thing to say, in all honesty, is that I really didn't have a clear idea of why I was going to law school. I mean, obviously my mother had some influence there, but I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't want to be a litigator. And let me also let you in on a little secret of the legal profession, if I might. There is a massive disclosure failure between law practitioners and law schools. And it goes like this. If you were medical students, you would have entered this medical school knowing full well that after 4 years of medical school, you'd spend a year as an intern, 3 years as a resident, and only then would anybody take you seriously. But the same is true in the law. They just don't say anything about it. And maybe it's an object lesson in what disclosure means and how important it is for people to organize their lives. But I think you'll find that the training process that comes after these 3 years is very, very demanding. Again, you'll have a lot of sleepless nights like you've had here. It's excruciating in a way. But when it's done after those 3 years, you really will be able to help people. You will have absorbed important lessons and skills that you will be able to implement reflexively, even if you haven't slept. No matter how much harassment your adversaries have given you, you will be able to carry these things out because you've absorbed that training. I think one of the most important lessons I was taught by one of the corporate partners at Simpson Thacher, who I worked for, was that you should try to gather as much knowledge as you can about as many different things as you can, as quickly as you can. And the reason for that is you never know when you're going to leave the firm, Simpson Thacher. You never know when you're going to leave the ACLU or the Housing Authority or whatever it is you're undertaking this initial training. When you leave, you're going to walk out with a toolkit, the doctor's black bag, if you will, and you want to have that filled with as much knowledge and tricks of the trade as you possibly can. Some of my classmates skipped that whole training process. They went directly into investment banking, they went directly into politics and so forth, and they were very successful. I was neither that ambitious or courageous, so I went along with the program and did 5 years of corporate law practice, from which I was rescued by Daniel Patrick Moynihan, as a result of which I will die in his debt. I ran his New York City office for a couple of years, and that brought me into a three-dimensional world. I guess another thing to tip you off about is you may not escape the profession if you have ambitions to do that. You may stay in it and be happy and have a great career, but if you want to get out, getting out is harder than it seems. I was lucky that Senator came in and pulled me up, but that doesn't always happen. So after working for Senator Moynihan for a couple of years, I went into public finance, and the bulk of my professional career was as an investment banker in public finance. I knew nothing about public finance when I started. I knew that roads and bridges and airports and sewers had to be paid for somehow, but I didn't know how that happened. I didn't have an MBA. People said to me, well, how did you get into business if you didn't have an MBA? I said, I bought a calculator. And that, helped. But when I got into the business world, I discovered fairly soon that if you were working on a financing, a big bond issue or a corporate merger or something like that, as a banker, a lawyer could ruin your day and say something like, well, we can't issue the bonds in that form because we'd have to amend the trust indenture, and that would take 2 weeks. I said, no, it won't. Then I'll draft it. And then we'll meet tomorrow and we'll proceed. So having the experience of being a lawyer makes you able to deal with lawyers in the business world who will be, some of them trying to help you and some of them trying to derail you. My mother never really could understand why anyone who had a brain would not become a lawyer. Just flat out, it was, in her mind, it was really the only thing to do. But she didn't know much about corporate law. She didn't practice corporate law. And as I got started, I was amazed at how many things I had to find out that she wasn't going to be able to tip me off about. And then I knew there was always some disappointment on her part that I had left the profession. So after I started at Lazard Frères for 7 years, I learned the trade there, and then I had my own firm, Carmona Motley, for a bunch of years. And after I'd done my first fairly large bond issue for the Cleveland water system, I bought one of those tombstone ads. You probably don't read the printed paper anymore, but in the Wall Street Journal, but you could buy an ad that would put the par amount of the bonds and who was the financial advisor and so forth, and it said Carmona Motley. And I took that over to her chambers one day and showed her this. It was a pretty big bond issue. And she looked at it and said, oh, I see. So it started to sort of to gel a little bit. She still never really forgave me, but so I'd like to wrap up my thoughts with something that has to do with the rule of law. We hear a lot about rule of law. The dean mentioned it. Every time you pick up the paper these days, whether you're on the whatever side of this political spectrum you're on, you're talking about the rule of law, and what does that mean? So I don't have a complete answer, but I have an episode from my mother's career that brings to mind quite sharply what it can take at times to preserve the rule of law. And the story is this. My mother worked on the many cases, school desegregation cases, all the big university desegregation cases, and that included University of Mississippi, where she represented James Meredith, who was the first black person to attend University of Mississippi. And that litigation took 2 years. That's a long time for any case. And finally, the Fifth Circuit, after many rulings, issued a ruling that said that Meredith had to be admitted. The state of Mississippi took it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court refused to hear it. And so when they were getting ready to take Meredith to register, there was a lot of anxiety about violence on the campus because the resistance was massive. And Bobby Kennedy was the Attorney General, Jack Kennedy was the president, and they talked to Governor Ross Barnett of Mississippi about getting Meredith to register, and Barnett told him it would be okay. There would be state troopers and state police, and everything would be fine. Well, the federal marshals, 3 or 4 of them took Meredith to register. Got to Oxford, Mississippi to register him. There were no police, no state police, no protection. There was a riot. 3 people died in the riot. The marshals were just barely able to get Meredith to safety, so he wasn't killed. And the Kennedys realized that the governor had basically lied to them, had just stiffed them. The Kennedys also realized that they had only one chance to get this right, to get it fixed. My mother used to refer to the Meredith case as the last battle of the Civil War, and I thought she was just being sort of, it was just a metaphor. But what the Kennedys did after the riot was they sent 15,000 United States Army troops to Oxford, Mississippi. It has a population of maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people. Overwhelming force, because they knew they couldn't just send 30 federal marshals and try to get it done and have another riot. And when I was making the film about my mother, at that time I happened to see on ESPN College a documentary made about the Meredith case from the perspective of the football team, and that's another story I'll tell you another time. But in that film, there was footage of the 15,000 soldiers billeted on the campus in rows of tents. And I don't know if you're familiar with Matthew Brady's photographs from the Civil War, but it looks exactly like that, rows and rows of tents for this overwhelming force to make sure that the authority of the federal government, the authority of the federal courts, would be honored. That's what it took. So you've got great times ahead, but remember that some of the things you'll be dealing with will be very demanding, very difficult, very unpredictable. But I am thrilled for you, as your families are, and as the dean said, you're going to make it. Thank you.